172 feet, wingtip to wingtip, no tail or vertical stabilizer, nothing that looks like it should fly. On radar, it returns a signature roughly the size of a steel marble, about .001 square meters. The Air Force's own documentation uses that figure. The B-2 Spirit carries 40,000 pounds of ordnance across 6,000 nautical miles without refueling, and integrated air defense networks built to track everything from cruise missiles to satellites cannot find it. It also costs $2.1 billion per airframe. That price made it the most expensive aircraft ever manufactured, the most ridiculed line item in Pentagon history, the fattest target in Congress for 3 straight decades, and a permanent case study in procurement gone sideways. Senators called it a Cold War relic before the Cold War ended. Editorial boards called it a monument to waste. One GAO report from 1997 laid out the unit cost in a single table and let the numbers speak. Program managers at Northrop Grumman heard the word boondoggle so often it stopped registering. Jack Northrop himself, the man who chased the flying wing concept starting in 1929, died in 1981, 3 years before the program went classified. He never saw a B-2 fly. His son John later described visiting him in a wheelchair, showing him a sketch of the design Northrop had spent his life trying to build. The old man started crying and said he knew why God had kept him alive. If this kind of story hits you somewhere, the machines, the people behind them, the decades it took to prove them right, the money it burned along the way, hit subscribe and leave a comment. A like helps more than you think. 21 airframes. That is all the Air Force bought. 21 aircraft to justify a program that burned through $44 billion in development and procurement. The question everyone asked in 1989 still hangs in the air. Why does a country need an invisible bomber that costs more than its weight in gold? Muroc Dry Lake, 1948. The Mojave heat bends the air above the hardpan so badly that the YB-49 looks like it's floating before it even lifts off. Test pilot Max Stanley pushed the throttles forward on 8 Allison J-35 turbojets and felt the whole airframe vibrate, not like a conventional bomber shaking loose, but a low harmonic hum through the seat pan and up through his boots into his jaw. The flying wing climbed and flew. It handled, by most accounts, like nothing the Air Force had ever evaluated. So why did it die? The official story involves stability problems. Yaw instability. Specifically, the absence of a vertical tail meant the YB-49 wandered in crosswinds and demanded constant pilot correction. A crash in June 1948 killed Captain Daniel Forbes and co-pilot Lieutenant Colonel Glenn Edwards. Edwards Air Force Base carries his name. The second prototype crashed the following March, 5 crew killed. Those losses gave the Air Force cover, but the politics ran deeper. Jack Northrop refused to merge his company with Convair. Secretary of the Air Force Stuart Symington wanted the consolidation. Northrop wouldn't budge. The B-36 contract went to Convair instead. Northrop later told investigators he believed the YB-49 cancellation amounted to retaliation. Congressional hearings in 1949 probed the connection. Nothing stuck. The procurement file from that period remains incomplete. Pages missing, memos unsigned, decisions attributed to no one in particular. 32 years passed. The flying wing vanished from Air Force planning entirely. Northrop built the F-5 and the T-38 trainer that every American military pilot touched at some point. The flying wing collected dust in archives. Then, in 1981, inside a compartmented program so classified that fewer than 200 people held the clearance, the Pentagon resurrected it. The Advanced Technology Bomber Program, ATB, asked a question that only one aerodynamic shape could answer. How do you penetrate Soviet integrated air defense networks that track everything moving faster than a bird at any altitude above 50 feet? The answer required an airframe with no right angles, no vertical surfaces, no engine inlets facing forward, no cavity of any kind to bounce radar energy back to the transmitter. Lockheed had the F-117, but that carried 2 bombs. The Air Force needed a heavy bomber that could haul strategic ordnance to Moscow and back. Northrop's engineers pulled the old drawings out. The shape they needed already existed. It had existed since 1941. 31 hours into the mission, the pilot's lower back seized. Somewhere over the Atlantic, westbound, returning to Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri after dropping 16 joint direct attack munitions on Serbian targets. The cockpit of a B-2 holds 2 crew in ejection seats designed for maybe 4 hours of comfort. This sortie lasted 49. What did those 49 hours buy? On March 24, 1999, 2 B-2s launched from the center of Missouri, flew to the Balkans, struck integrated air defense targets in Serbia, and flew home. No tanker armada visible to enemy sensors, no fighter escort. They flew without a suppression of enemy air defense package, burning holes in the threat rings ahead of them. The Serbian SA-6 and SA-3 batteries, late-model Soviet hardware operated by crews who trained against NATO profiles for decades, never acquired them. According to the after-action report from Air Combat Command, B-2s flew less than 1% of the total sorties over Serbia, but struck 33% of the targets in the first 8 weeks, 1% of the sorties, a third of the targets. The crew wore adult diapers. There is no elegant way to say that. A cot behind the seats folded down, so one pilot could sleep while the other flew. Sleep being generous for what happens on a vibrating cot inside a pressurized cockpit at 40,000 feet with a nuclear-rated airframe humming around you. Brigadier General Leroy Barnage, who commanded the 509th Bomb Wing, described the mission profile as the most physically demanding sustained combat flying in Air Force history. The Sidewinder snake, the animal, not the missile, can detect temperature differences of 0.003 of a degree Celsius through infrared pits below its eyes. This connects to nothing about the B-2, which uses no infrared guidance whatsoever. Afghanistan changed the math permanently. After September 11th, B-2s flew from Missouri to Kandahar, 44-hour round trips with multiple aerial refuelings, and delivered precision munitions on Taliban positions within 72 hours of the order. A conventional strike package doing the same work required a carrier battle group, tanker support, fighter escort, electronic warfare aircraft, combat search and rescue standing by. The Navy estimated that package at roughly 12 to 15 aircraft per sortie, plus the logistics tail. One B-2 replaced the entire stack, cost per sortie. That number Congress kept throwing around. A B-2 sortie over Afghanistan ran approximately $720,000 in fuel, maintenance, and munitions. The equivalent conventional package, the dozen-plus aircraft, the tanker offloads, the carrier operating costs, ran between $3 and $5 million. The bomber everyone called too expensive was the cheapest way to put bombs on target from the continental United States. Libya, 2011. 3 B-2s destroyed 45 hardened aircraft shelters in a single night. Round trip from Missouri. 25 hours. Nobody in Congress mentioned the cost. 21 built. 20 operational after Spirit of Kansas burned on the runway at Anderson Air Force Base, Guam, in February 2008. Moisture in the air data sensors fed wrong angles of attack to the flight computers during takeoff. Both crew ejected. The investigation pinned it on maintenance procedure, not airframe design. The airframe itself was cleared, 0 combat losses. 35 years of operational flying. Every integrated air defense network on Earth has had 3 decades to develop a counter. The S-300, the S-400, the Chinese HQ-9, all fielded and tested, all marketed as the answer to American stealth. The B-2 keeps deploying. According to Air Force Global Strike Command's publicly available readiness data through 2024, the fleet maintains a mission-capable rate above 80%, despite an average airframe age north of 30 years. Maintenance runs approximately 60 hours per flight hour. Brutal, expensive, and by every indication worth it, because nobody has proposed grounding them. The B-21 Raider, Northrop Grumman's successor, rolled out in December 2022 at Plant 42 in Palmdale. Same company, same flying wing. The shape Jack Northrop sketched on drafting paper in 1941. I think the committee that canceled the YB-49 owes someone an apology. but the people who'd collect it are all dead. In April 1980, Northrop Corporation's then-chairman Tom Jones visited Jack Northrop at his home. Northrop had suffered strokes. He could not speak clearly. Jones brought a security clearance and a small model of the advanced technology bomber, the shape that would become the B-2. He set it in front of the old man. According to Jones's account given years later to the Smithsonian Air and Space Archive, Northrop studied it, ran his fingers along the leading edge, and wrote on a pad, "Now I know why God has kept me alive." He died 10 months later. The B-2's first flight came 8 years after that, on July 17, 1989, with Northrop test pilot Bruce Hines at the controls. Sources conflict on whether Hines knew the Jack Northrop story before he flew. The company says he did. Whiteman Air Force Base sits in western Missouri, about 60 miles southeast of Kansas City. Soybean fields run to the fence line. The B-2 hangars, climate-controlled, individually built for each airframe to protect the radar-absorbent coating, stand in a row along the flight line. Visitors driving Highway 50 can see the shape on final approach if the timing is right. It passes overhead at roughly 800 feet, 172 feet of wing, with no body and no tail, slower than you'd expect, quieter than you'd believe.